Response video to LudditeReturns. So I've watched the first 30 seconds or whatever, 22 seconds. And so he's going to apparently argue as if I'm making some sort of one-to-one comparison between drunk driving and procreation or nataling or having children. And I'm not. Okay, the purpose of the analogy is to demonstrate or to illustrate the similarities in terms of kind, in the way of people do not conceive children soberly. They don't do it with their best judgment intact. They often do it with their worst judgment, and they do it with a false sense of power and control and competence, way beyond their actual competence. A lack of appreciation for the risk they're exposing the other people on the highway, which would be the children, to. And so in that way it's analogous. What's not being made is some sort of this is identical to that. That has never been the purpose of this particular analogy. That is more like the Frankenstein analogy or the lack of emergency analogy, the ones that demonstrate the asymmetry, and the ones that are more explicit in demonstrating imposition. So anyway, just to be clear, that this metaphor of drunk driving has more to do with the many ways in which people are impaired in their judgment in this very important decision.
In effect, false analogies are akin to false accusations. That which is bleached white may be forever stained by a false accusation, qua accusation, and often truth is utterly powerless to remove the stain.
Whatever. The fact is that you don't have control. It's not a controllable circumstance. And every assumption you make about how you're going to be able to control is essentially like the drunk pretending that he isn't impaired, claiming, I'm not impaired, I only had 2 drinks, that kind of crap. It has the same aroma, this arrogance where you will say, I'm going to be lucky. That's bullshit.
An innocent man is charged with child molestation, but already your limbic system is forming associations. Emotions often fill the epistemological gap.
Well, whatever. I'm not taking any responsibility for what people do emotionally. I've argued for people to avoid emotionalism, so that's about all you can do, is temper people against that. So I just don't see it as an emotional subject. The subject is really about how much thought and care do people give to this decision. How many people are, in fact, literally, quite literally, conceived in drunkenness? Think about it.
This truth was known to Mussolini and the fascists. Hitler and the Nazis has always been known to...
Oh, dear. We always got to do this crap, right? Fine, whatever. Propaganda, say it all you want. Proving it's another case. So again, you're doing exactly. Your hypocrisy is being revealed, because you are using the label of propagandist without proof of propaganda, which makes you just as guilty, which makes you actually guilty of the crime you are falsely accusing me of.
Theologues and leaders of the true believers, that in the land of the blind,
God, I wish you would get a new microphone.
Is king. Here in Mentham's perpetual verbalizations of repulsive and disgusting, his omnipresent, holier than thou, righteous indignation, his incessant screams of anger. Well,
frankly, you're going to find that with any subject that means something. And sometimes people need to know you're serious. So, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you can necessarily extract emotion from motivating important subjects. I mean, it's not important to you because you don't recognize the crime. You don't see the rape. You don't see the abuse. So it's not an emotional issue for you. Like maybe vegetarianism might not mean anything to you because you have discounted the reality of the animals being tortured in the little cages. I don't do that, therefore I will have a sincere and honest emotion, and I'm not going to find that at all something I'm going to persecute myself for. So, fuck you is what I say to that.
And one can only conclude that in the war between the cerebral cortex and limbic system, in Mintham's limbic system napalmed the fuck out of his cerebral cortex and planted its flag there long ago.
Yeah, well, that's another claim you keep making, or your kind keeps making, okay, that it's a subject built out of emotion, but I would argue that there's no preordained negative prejudice. The prejudice is obviously in the other direction. People have a life-affirming prejudice, not a life-unaffirming prejudice. So I would argue that I have earned my emotional character that is decidedly negative, and I earned it by overcoming the presumption, the benefit of the doubt. That's the native disposition, the will to find a justification, the desire to find a justification. One desires life to make sense. One does not desire to find out it's a crock of shit.
So when Mintham claims that I was a victim of that violation of consent, referencing his coming into being via a procreative act, when the actualization of a state of affairs absent consent is not synonymous with the violation of consent, when it's logically impossible to violate the consent of an entity that does not exist.
Well, see, there we go again. So he's going to keep pretending that we don't know that babies grow into human beings, and that we don't know statistically that it's for certain that certain character traits, certain things will manifest in those to-be humans. The humans that will come out in a certain curves. There will be all kinds of bell curves, and there'll be statistical curves based on heart disease and obesity and lots of things that'll be statistically consistent. And he's pretending we don't know any of that. Correct? I mean, there's no other conclusion to draw except that he's pretending, like a drunk, that he's not informed. That he has no idea that drunkenness might make him a less competent driver. He's just pretending that he doesn't know statistically that this is the outcome. And I merely stated, for the record, that I'm one of the statistics, the current statistics, and I'm saying to you, I will speak for my correlate in the future. I will have a correlate in the future. There will be a statistical number of human beings who will commit suicide in the future. And I will speak for some of those individuals. I will. I will testify on their behalf.
He's not being rational. That's his limbic system talking. Now, he may express a retroactive analysis such that counterfactually he would rather not have existed, but that's not to say any consent was violated via procreation.
Well, I'm just saying it's automatically violated, okay? You don't get consent. It's a fact. You don't get consent to create somebody's existence. If there was a God, he didn't get my consent. This is just a fact. And my argument is in a circumstance where you don't have consent, where you have to function in with somebody else's welfare, is in your hands. You're controlling it, in effect. That without consent, that a higher standard of conduct is going to be imposed than with your own body. So when you're acting in somebody else's behalf, you're at a higher standard that your judgment be clear and solid and reliable. If you wanted to get drunk in your own living room and trip over the sofa and break your skull open and die, that's your prerogative. But if you're going to go out onto the procreation road, okay, you're not allowed to make errors in judgment. You've got to be clear-headed and solid in your determination that this is the right thing to do for the individual you're imposing upon, because you can't do anything else but impose. You have no choice. It's the nature of the act.
An evaluative judgment such that one concludes that it would have been better that a state of affairs failed to obtain is not a sufficient condition for a violation of consent.
Well, whatever. Again, I'm not gonna argue with your non-existence. Okay, they will exist if you procreate and create them. They're a will be, not a could be or maybe be. They'll be a will be, and they will have a character through determinism and statistics. And it's just, again, part of your drunken lies to pretend you don't know better. Because you do know better. You do know that fact, that there are risks involved.
To illustrate, if I'm driving, all parties involved follow the relevant traffic laws, and a motor vehicle crash occurs, I might very well conclude I'd rather not have taken this trip where said state of affairs was actualized, aka the motor vehicle crash.
But AKA, that's not how it's happening in the real world. The real world is, especially in procreation, there's one individual that's going to make these decisions. So it's essentially, you're sitting in your living room, the drunk drives into your living room and runs you over. Clearly it's not an accident. It's an inevitability by statistical fact. And somebody's going to have to be responsible for it, right? Who should be responsible? The person sitting in their living room, they shouldn't have to explain it. No, it's the people who knew it was a risk. They knew it was going to happen in some inevitable number, and they chose to impose. They chose to impose. They chose to impose. So they're the ones that have to account for the catastrophe.
This evaluative judgment does not thereby translate into a violation of consent. In the case of a procreative act, the very necessary possibility condition for a violation of consent is absent.
Well, again, this is just silly to keep saying violation of consent when you know all procreation has to violate consent. There's no way to avoid a violation of consent. The question is whether you have enough authority, okay, to justify that violation of consent, that absence of consent. You're claiming you have a biologically derived right, a God-given right, to play procreator. That there's something innate in your right to do this act, even though it doesn't allow for this fundamental ethical requirement of consent. It is intrinsically and fundamentally impositional, and you wish to evade responsibility by claiming nature did it, when you in fact chose to do it, like a drunk. An arrogant, obnoxious drunk.
And when Mintam charges procreators, myself included, with the position relative to the entity as not yet brought into existence, I don't have to give a fuck about you because you don't exist yet. This is certainly no position of mine.
Well, you just articulated the position. You just claimed the position. You just claimed the right to negate the existence of the person capable of giving consent. And that was your evasion. Instead of just admitting, I don't get consent and I impose because I believe I have the right to do that. Instead of being honest and saying clearly you believe yourself competent and authorized to make this risky decision, period. You've decided to drive a car that does have a risk connected to it, whether it's your drunkenness or the car's malfunction, the imperfection of the car. It doesn't matter. You know statistically that eventually the car's going to go into a living room and it's going to run somebody over. And I, as one of the victims, am asking for an accounting. I'm asking for one of you to justify yourselves. And all you keep doing is saying, I'm too drunk. Yeah.
And Mintam is a professional at tearing down straw men, quite the opposite in my view. If a procreator or would-be procreator doesn't give a fuck about the entity they're going to bring into existence,
they don't give a fuck about the entity they bring into existence who they catastrophically harm. That's the individual they don't give a fuck about. That's the one I've clearly identified as the one they don't give a fuck about. They drive into his living room, they run him over, and then they take the fuck off and never provide an accounting. There's no undo button, there's no fix it button. There's just a fuck you, I have a right to drive.
And eat shit and get the fuck off the planet. Once again, he's not being rational, he's being an emotive reptile.
Alright, and you're the ones that say, go kill yourself. That'll solve the problem of the next victim. Yeah, it's not going to solve the problem for the next victim.
More napalm from his limbic system. When Mintam charges those within the basic paradigm of the affirmation of life.
Yes, well, the paradigm of the affirmation of life. You mean the authority to play God. The paradigm of arrogant assholes who think they're authorized to conduct biological experiments because a DNA molecule gave them a license. Period. They're as authorized as a mosquito. They have the same badge of authority. Yeah, nature made me do it. I'm too stupid to think and be accountable. Duh.
With the, to quote, thumping the Bible of a DNA molecule, there are at least two informal logical fallacies involved here.
Oh, let's hear
He's
this.
poisoning the well via a composition fallacy.
Oh, right.
It's clearly fallacious that a DNA molecule is what is being affirmed via a procreative act.
Oh, please. It's all over your arguments. It's all over Anacontovad's arguments. It's why I am what I am. Okay, I don't wear condoms. It's against my religion. The one I made up. Yeah, socks are for feet. Yeah, no, it's all over the anti argument. Is this argument from the sacred biology. It's what we're made to do. Like eating meat. We're made to do it, even though we're not. So who's the propagandist? Oh, that's right. It would be you. You.
Even as persons are constituted by DNA molecules. Just as it would be obviously fallacious to claim that what the church members congregating in a stone cathedral are affirming are the stones of the cathedral. A DNA molecule is merely the empirically contingent vehicle or furniture, if you will. Just as white paper...
Did that mean anything to you? It didn't mean anything to me. Just sounds like a rationalization that, oh, well, the DNA molecule is talking in my ear and I can't not listen to it, or what? He's just trying to third person the DNA molecule. So he can still use it as an excuse, like it made me do it. The talking dog made me do it. You know, he still wants it as an excuse, but he's trying to distance himself from it, which is just a joke. The DNA molecule told the goldfish, and the goldfish told me what to do. That kind of thing.
And black ink may be the concrete objects by which one reads Shakespeare.
Blah, blah, blah.
While said concrete objects themselves are not evaluatively relevant. So when Mintam bespeaks of DNA Bible thumpers, once again, his cerebral cortex sustained yet another round of limbic napalm. Now,
well, again, like I said, we don't have to go very far to find the arguments from the DNA from Zombie Picture Show and Anacontovad, and just go down the list of all the people who are anti-anti.
I'm going to try to keep it simple. Perhaps I can get through to the
barren
wasteland that is in Mintam's cerebral cortex.
Yeah, whatever.
Mintam is insisting that it's all about the DNA, the DNA molecule. Ooh, DNA!
Well, the DNA molecule did in fact give you the power to reproduce. And it's the DNA molecule that gave it to you without passing any test. And, on top of that, the DNA molecule, being the dumb thing that it is, doesn't care about things like fairness and deserve and consent. All these important characteristics that intelligences can understand, But animal organisms by themselves, without any culture and sophistication and learning, aren't going to understand these concepts, you see. So yes, things that have intelligence and have acquired an education and understand what fairness is and what deserve is and what consent is and understand how vital these things are, would not give license to people who have no respect for those things. Accountability being one of the words also we could throw in there.
Now this is a person. This person's made out of DNA. DNA eyes, DNA nose, DNA mouth, all poorly drawn, of course, but it is the person, the emergent features via the structure of DNA and the irreducibility of those.
Well, whatever. Again, like I said, I am not that kind of person. My brain has emerged out of knowledge. Einstein and Armstrong and the Curies and, Plato, and you can go right on, you could go on a list of all the names, Galileo, Benjamin Franklin, a ton of names who have elevated our understanding. And it's that understanding that I call me. Okay, the biology, I don't give license to biology. I give license to mind.
Features, the entire phenomenological realm that is being firm, not the DNA. Just as when one reads Dostoevsky, it is the Dostoevsky one is interested in, not the white paper and black ink. So when Mentam...
exactly, and what would Dostoevsky say? We could put that on a bumper sticker, right? What would Dostoevsky say? We could go right down the list of, what thinking minds say, and a lot of thinking minds have said in the past that caution is important. And you're not exercising that. You're just defending reckless drunkery.
Please shut the fuck up about the DNA molecule already.
Like I said, I'm not the one using it as an excuse. Okay, go talk to Anticontavad about his nature. His inability to overcome it. Yes. And the others, like I said, the myriad of others who say it's some sort of biological necessity to have children. That's what they say. Alright, so I only bring it up because they bring it up. I'd like to have an intelligent conversation about exactly where you get the right to gamble with somebody else's money, using another metaphor. As I say, you have acquired no such authority. You have done nothing to demonstrate any such right. Like a bird, the bird analogy, you are laying eggs on dog shit and calling yourself accomplished. And I'm saying, no, that's not what the facts indicate. That indicates that that's one dumb bird. Yeah, it's bad news, bird. Yeah, bad news. Shit egg layers. Yeah, bad news.